So thank you for joining our MAiDHouse book club tonight. We'll be discussing Molly Peacock's collection of poems, A Widow's Crayon Box. My name is Stan. I am a volunteer and a board member at MAiDHouse, and I will be the moderator tonight at this discussion. Reminder that we are recording this session, and a link to the recording will be sent to everyone who registered this evening. Tekla will be adding the MAiDHouse diversity statement to the chat, so you can take a look at it there. I'll begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge as a virtual event that we span many traditional territories. As the host of this meeting, I am on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nation and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Many thanks to everybody who's joining us tonight. I think this is our fifth or sixth MAiDHouse book club that we have hosted. And tonight we're going to be talking about The Widow's Crayon Box. So unlike most book clubs, we're actually joined by the author, which is such a special treat. And another thing that's a little different is that you don't have to have read the book, but you do have to get it afterwards and read it because it's really like such a gorgeous effort. Tonight we're joined by these incredible, dazzling humans with exceptional eyewear, Molly Peacock and Oceanna Hall. Molly is a poet, a biographer, an essayist, and a writer of tales whose multi-genre literary life has taken her from New York City to Toronto, from poetry to prose, and back again to poetry. Molly is the author of 8 collections of poetry, including The Widow's Crayon Box, which we'll be talking about tonight. And she's also the author of 2 biographies about incredible women artists. She's the founder of Poetry in Motion, a cultural institution to bring poetry to New York subways and buses. She has been a poet in residence in several universities across North America and is a member of the graduate faculty at Spalding University MFA program. And I am also joined by Oceanna, and she is joining us from the unceded lands of the Salish Nations. She is a certified specialist with the Canadian Association of Spiritual Care, specializing particularly in palliative, end-of-life, MAiD support, bereavement, and also addiction. She's a registered clinical counseling hypnotherapist and is currently serving as the clinical specialist spiritual health practitioner for the Island Authority Saanich Peninsula Hospital. Oceanna has actively supported family and friends of individuals who have chosen MAiD since it was legalized in 2016. She facilitates both individual and also group online MAiD bereavement support groups. She's often called upon by a variety of interprofessional Canadian health organizations to provide training in supporting families both during, before, and after a MAiD provision. So welcome to the both of you. I've been buzzing since our last conversation, and I'm really excited for this talk. This is supposed to be a little bit interactive, so if the participants have a question for Molly or Oceanna, you're welcome to put it in the chat below, or actually rather put it in the Q&A box. The Q&A box goes directly to me, and then I'll be able to read out your questions. Tekla will be adding, and Nikki will be adding some interesting resources to the chat during the discussion. And you're also welcome to use the chat if you have feedback, if you want to chat with the different participants, you're totally welcome to do that as well. So I wanted to start, if possible, with a reading. Molly, would you be able to read from your book?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Stan, and thank you, Tekla, and thank you, Oceanna, for, first of all, for inviting me, and second of all, for participating with me. It means a lot. I'm going to read the first poem from The Widow's Crayon Box, and it's called Touched. When I feel moved and then say, I am touched, It's another presence inside me I sense. The dip of an oar, a canoe being launched. I'm the oar, but I'm the water. And sense at once initiation and response. After you died, I felt you next to me. And over months, you entered gradually into that lake and disappeared. Not gone, but so internalized, you're not next to me. You're not the port or the support. You're done being you. And my loneliness is so extreme that I feel moved by almost anything, even the forehead of a dog that leans against my knee in an elevator. Things as brief as all the ways you would lean against me getting a glass of water at the sink. Everything touches me now that I'm not touched, but moved. That's the first poem in the Widow's Crayon box that has a premise, and it's unusual for a book of poems to have a premise. But the premise is that after I became a widow, my husband having chosen MAiD, I realized I wasn't feeling the 8 basic colors of emotions from a small crayon box. I was feeling the entire big crayon box, all 152. And the poem Touched starts us off with some of those feelings.
Can we, first of all, listening to you read the poem is really exceptional. As I've read it a few times, and there's something about hearing it in your voice. So thank you for that. Uh, I do want to talk about how you start because you start in the after. Like there's actually a section called after, and the reader is sort of suddenly immersed in this, like you mentioned, a lake. You're suddenly immersed in this lake of after your husband has died. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you mind going back and telling us about that before time? Maybe a little bit about Michael?
Oh, no, not at all. The second section is before, and it's a larger section in many ways. Um, um, my late husband and I met when I actually first saw him in grade 8. He was in the English class across the hall. So that was my first glimpse of him. And then when we were in high school, um, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. We went to the junior prom. We went to the senior prom. We lasted through our first year of university and then broke up and didn't see each other for 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't realize
yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And when I published my second book of poems, I was lucky. I was lucky. I got a review in the New York Times, and he's sitting in London, Ontario, reading the New York Times, and he sees my name. And that was the beginning. And almost at the same time, I run into an ex-girlfriend of his who tells me that he's now an English professor. I thought he was a math major when I knew him. Uh, and and then tells me that he's a professor at the University of Western Ontario, but tells me also that he has had a very serious illness, that he had melanoma, and we were all in our 30s at that point. No, actually, we were a little bit older than that. But he had had melanoma when he was 33.
Oh, wow.
And so that diagnosis of stage 4 melanoma at that time um, was my reintroduction to him. And finally, after some letter exchanges and other things, we met in person. And all he said to me about his illness was, "Oh, could we move into the shade?" That's all he said. If I hadn't known from the ex-girlfriend, I wouldn't have known anything except that. And um, very gradually, though, so I went home and I wrote a poem about this. I wrote a poem saying, "You didn't tell me you were dying." I thought he was dying. Um, and the poem, when the poem was published, I sent it to him and then finally called. And we started about a 6 or 7 year long series of phone calls to one another. We were both involved with other people. It wasn't romantic. It was these calls that were the truth of our lives. And finally, after all of that, when our other relationships, mine exploded, his withered away, when that all happened, then um, we got married at the age of 45. And our whole marriage, which was 28 years,
Wow.
I I I married him as a cancer survivor and went through about every 6 years another recurrence. And it was very unusual because we actually walked into one physician's office who looked up and said, "Oh, I thought you'd be dead by now."
Wow.
And I mean, quite an incredible thing to hear, but also something that I'm sure many people thought. Uh, but he was a marathon runner and a very distinguished scholar, and he only had kind of one gear, and that gear was forward. Um, in the last 6 years of his life, he underwent a drug trial. My caregiving really, really seriously ramped up.
Mm.
Uh, Even though he was somebody who was super independent, he really didn't like to be mothered, and that was good for me. But the complications of a marriage that involves a lot of caregiving is in the before section of this book, and also the love, the admiration, the ways we pulled together is in the book, and the ways that dying and illness pressured us to also pull apart. I mean, all of those things are are part of the reality of a marriage that um, in some ways began in the stress of this illness, but had our adolescent selves always at the heart of it. You know, I don't know, is this TMI? Probably not. I mean,
No, no, second chances. Let's go.
we
Yeah.
met, we were our first lovers. We were under the covers when we were 18. We had all of that propelling us. Um, and it was, it allowed us to live on two tracks. I mean, we had we lived on the life track and the death track, and we moved back and forth.
Right.
Uh, and that's the best I can do with the before.
And he received MAiD in 2021.
2021, during COVID, at Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto.
And
I should say, I mean, as many people who are listening here understand, you don't have a lot of control over your life toward the end if you live in our modern medical age. It has helped extend your life, but at the same time, you cede layer after layer of control over your life. And so do your loved ones. Even though you're making choices, it's within a circumstance where you feel like you hardly have control. And one of the things, I mean, the most significant thing about the end of his life is that he had that control. He got to choose the day of his death. He got to name it. He was a James Joyce scholar of um, James Joyce's Ulysses, and Ulysses takes place on a Thursday. And when he was asked when he would like to die, uh, this was, in a really bizarre world COVID situation, he suddenly said, tomorrow. And I didn't expect him to say tomorrow, but it was a Thursday. And I thought, of course, it's a Thursday. Yes. And he got to make that choice. He went out on the day, in some ways, that he had been studying all of his mature life. Whoa. I have chills saying that.
I do too. The hand, like the hairs on my arms are just.
I know. I mean, so uh, I'm not quite sure where else to go with this, but I think you've got the before.
Um, well, let's also talk about the like a little bit about the after because I want to know when you began to write the poetry. When did this start?
Um, the Widow's Crayon box started about intensely. It started about a month after Mike passed away. Um, he died. I cried for 28 days straight. I would wake up, and I would think, am I, are you going to do this again? Are you, I mean, you're going to cry again? And yeah, I mean, sometimes I'd get a few hours into the day and then something would hit me and I would cry. And I kept going and I just started to watch myself and wonder, well, what is this? Who are you? And of course, I felt very close to him when I cried. And I talked to him when I cried. But uh, and I woke up on the 29th day and I didn't realize this, but when I went to bed, I thought, I didn't cry. Something's turning. We were married for 28 years. I cried for 28 days. It's also a full moon cycle. I mean, there are so many I don't know, symbolic aspects of it. And that's when I started writing the poems of my widowhood, my new state. But before that, I did write some of the before poems that are in the book,
Mm.
because there's a sequence about caregiving, and I wrote some of that before, but I didn't have the well, I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the energy during all of that time to write the poems of them. Um, that really happened after, but really fast. They came really fast, and I wrote this book, in about a year and a half, I think. And
Wow.
usually a book of poems takes me about 5 years.
So it just came right out of you.
Yeah.
Um, Oceana, I don't want to forget about you because you have so much experience, so much rich experience leading both bereavement groups, for MAiD and then not MAiD. But is there a difference when you're leading these groups? Is there a difference in the type of grief that happens when there's a more deliberate goodbye?
I think there is a difference between MAiD grief and grief of other types of death. And I think it's because there's an appointment for it. There, when the doctor and the nurse come to your home, if it's in your home, or come to your hospital room, what the purpose of that is. And that's different than sitting by a bedside and watching someone, which can take sometimes a few days until they finally stop breathing. So, and I think it's that whole coming to the decision, which is also a challenging part because it can be a real source of conflict, especially if there's certain areas like philosophical or religious dogma teachings of certain churches. MAiD is seen as something that should not be chosen. So if you can have that conflict there. So yeah, so it is very different. And oftentimes I find afterwards in the bereavement groups themselves that what people are really looking for is other people that have had the experience. They want to hear from them. What was their experience like? Because I think this is a unique grief in that it's almost because it's so new. It's only been legal since 2016. So it's so new culturally. People are curious. Is my grief similar to others? Yes, the people are different and the
Yeah.
situations may be different, but what was another person's experience of having their loved one choose MAiD? And so I think in the groups that I run, because I have what I call a community group, which is welcoming to everyone, including some MAiD people, but I have MAiD specific groups and I've had those since 2016. And those people more than anything want to hear from other people that shared that experience. They want to know what was it like for them. And so the style I use for my MAiD groups is basically drop in, and there's no topics, there's no teachings, there's just people sharing their heart and sharing that visceral loss of oftentimes one of the most important people in their life before the death. So yeah, it's
Well,
different.
it does sound different. So in another online group where it might be open to everybody, you might have more of a structure involved.
Sometimes, yeah. I do find that people want to share their experience in a safe place because usually after a death, all your friends and family will listen to the story for maybe a few weeks or maybe even a few months. But after that, there's this attitude of, well, it's time for you to move on. It's time for you to get back into life. And that's not the experience of the person who has had the loss. So here they come to a group where everyone in that group is experiencing that same level of intense grief. Sometimes people don't even come to my groups until the person's been dead 5, 6, 7 years sometimes, and
Oh,
they've never taken the time to deal with the grief. But it gets to the point where it keeps coming up and I say it's like that little child's toy where you crank the handle and the clown comes up. And so when that happens with your grief, you're pushing it back down, pushing it down. And sometimes when it comes up, it can be almost like a volcano and can cause a lot of upset in your everyday life, even in your work, even in with your friends and with your family who may be grieving in a different way. And so then there's lots of judgment. Well, you didn't love them like I love them, because if you did, you would still be sad. And that's, everyone grieves in their own unique way. I really wish I loved when years ago you would wear a black armband, that people would know they needed to cut you some slack because the person that you loved died, and you're not the same person that you were before that death and before that illness. You're a different person now. You never get over death. The only thing that happens is you learn to integrate the pain and the sorrow in your life in a new way. And oftentimes people will say you find a new normal, but that grief, that pain is there. And with MAiD, I think there's also some other decisions. Like, I think one of the biggest ones is people wonder, did my loved one think they were a burden? And is that why they chose that? And so having, even though the family supports them 100%, there's always in the back of their mind, did I not show I cared enough? Did I not? And so this is where they hear from the other people in the group, oh, I felt that too, even though I knew it was not. So I say it's like a group is like building a bridge between the head and the heart. And
Huh.
at first,
Lovely.
they can be very separate. But I think as you deal with your grief, then you become more integrated again. So that's, yeah, that's my experience anyway.
I love the idea of having new drivers have that like sort of learning sticker on their
Yeah,
car.
yeah,
Like, could we,
yeah.
a black armband or something on the car or something just to
Well,
kind of
I think just learning, okay? Just like sort of a junior permit, junior
Yeah,
permit, just learning to deal with bereavement.
right. Yeah.
It is one of those things where I mean, I'm very moved by what you're saying, Oceanna, and I've experienced many of those aspects because I was able to write about it. It
Mhm.
helped me process it. And anybody who does any kind of, making at all or making music or writing or painting or dancing or doing anything that's expressive, that's a big help. But if you don't have that, then
Mhm.
and the and all the culture around you is telling you to move on, or my favorite, saying, "How are you?"
Yeah.
Which is like because you can't boil it down. um then it's much harder, and it's wonderful to have people to communicate that with. I have to say, I talk about Mike's choice for MAiD at every opportunity, because
Mhm.
I think you're so right. People are very curious about it, and they're curious about the circumstances. Um, for very verbal people, um, Mike and I had a lot of nonverbal communication,
Mhm.
and it was only, I mean, any many people who've been around this kind of illness will know there were any number of times I had to call 911, and the EMT people would rush in, etc. There were various emergencies, but in the last emergency, um, Mike looked up at me and said, um, "If I have to have another day like this, I want to go to sleep and never wake up." And I said to him, "Does that mean you want to start the MAiD process?" And that was the first time. I mean, in that extremis, that was the first time he said that to me. Obviously, we talked about it, but not in deep, what are the steps specifics. And when that happened, and again, it's during COVID, it was really, we couldn't get an ambulance. There were no ambulances available in Toronto. We actually got in a taxi cab, and the taxi cab driver, this angel who was driving the taxi cab, helped him into the hospital in all the crazy lines and interrogations and all of that kind of stuff that was going on. And he looked up when he was being admitted and said, I want to be admitted to palliative care. I want to begin the MAiD process. And it was the first time he was suddenly speaking in complete sentences. And he made that declaration. And I was there in a state of such relief because um, he made that decision, and then the course of the end of his life was clear to us, and it was clear to him. And I know this is a weird thing to say, but that declaration was beautiful, and then the whole rest of the process was beautiful. There was a beauty to it, a kind of magnificence, because he was able to direct that. And I was able to hear it, and we were able to go forward together. And the unity of it at the end of a marriage, when so many things are fading, fraying, all of those kinds of things, just gave me, and I think gave Mike, such a sense of strength, even as he was losing all of his strength.
And the creative process that Molly used in her, I love her book. I have to say, I'm prejudiced. I love it. I've been using it in the hospital here with, we always have a way of honoring the people from our palliative unit that had died the previous week. And so I've been using Molly's poems for the nurses. I always share a poem just so we can reflect on the fact that there is a sacredness to both birth, life, and death, and to be able to recognize that. And the way that Molly has created that, it's almost like the words flew from her heart to her pen, and they're just amazing poems. And I was saying before we came on, I just read another one today because they're so real. And her ability to take her grief and channel it through a creative process is unique, but it's also something that I always encourage people in my groups to do, because there's something about creating something creative, especially with your hands, your voice, but in a way it's completely different than what's in your head. It comes straight from your heart. And people are so shocked sometimes at what they create. Like, never before in their life have they written a poem or written in a journal or created a painting. And yet when they do, they look at it and they see so much of the person and the experience of the death in what they've created. They oftentimes just can't believe it. It's almost like it's inspired. And I think it is inspired because we often lock down that creative aspect of ourselves. I mean, children are so creative and they love it. But then we start worrying as we grow up, we worry, well, will anybody else like it? Or, but when
Right.
Molly
Will I get paid for it?
created,
Yeah.
Molly created from her, that's what made it so amazing. Yeah.
Oceanna, have you had patients that have also created, that are in the palliative care unit, that have turned to creativity or art or music?
Yeah.
Because they're also important holding this grief too.
Yep, I've had people that have written music, that I've written, they have spoken words of poems that I have written down for them because they could no longer physically write, but they wanted to be able to express in a creative way the love that they had for others, or sometimes just the love of life itself. What did it mean to be a person that walked on the earth and was alive? And one of the things I love about Molly's, there's so much of that in there. It's the reality of what it means to be a human being. She touched on it so beautifully. Yeah, I just love what you wrote. Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much, Oceanna. It's wonderful to have these poems appreciated in that way, and
Yeah.
I am touched and moved that you're reading your my poems
Mhm.
uh to these groups that you're running. It's and that
Mhm.
they're finding it meaningful. And I've
Mhm.
received a lot of letters from people,
Mhm.
and a number of letters, well, emails from people who said that they'd never written a poem before in their lives,
Mhm.
and that they lost someone, and suddenly these
Mhm.
words started
Right.
coming out of them. And at that point, you're not saying to yourself, "Is this good? Should I be
Yeah.
doing this? What is this?" It's just that it's coming out of you, and you have to write
Mhm.
it down. And uh that's, I mean, that's a sort of miracle of processing,
Mhm.
really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh and that if you have it, then, and also writing gives you some control.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mm.
one of the things that happens is that making gives you a little control over your life, and you're kind of externalizing these very interior feelings that
Mhm.
you often don't get to
Mhm.
express in
Yep.
that way.
Yeah.
And the images that come to you, and where you are inspired, you almost feel visited. I mean, how did that image happen? And then you've written it down. And so it's very wonderful when people reach out to me and tell me that that's what they've done.
Would you be open to reading another poem now?
I'm going to read a poem that's actually about MAiD, that takes place, that has a subtitle. Uh, um, it's called "The Next World is One of Ideas," and it's about the process that Mike went through, the three-stage process, um, uh, of I guess I don't know what the verb is, obtaining MAiD. I'm not exactly sure, having MAiD.
Receiving, yeah.
The next world is one of ideas, and it's subtitled Medical Assistance in Dying, Toronto. About his death, we talked without words. Then came time for the interviews. Loss of hearing not quite total for either the old doctor or my husband. She, the doctor, held a tiny amplifier. So they yelled. The whole floor knew his wish: medical assistance in dying. 3 witnesses. List 10. Loop signed. Xed. A second doctor came in blue metallic glasses. The intervention. I've held cats for this. Now him. Soft favorite shirt. When he heard in 15 minutes, he sank, went still as snow. No thrash, no rattle, just the glide. The long furred body I loved even to his death. my head on his chest, warm earth. I shifted, not to hear his stopped heart. The clock was his last view. Held his hand until it cooled to a waxy gray. His suitcase was waiting. The next world is one of ideas. Are those his? Glass shapes in the sun. His clear thoughts refract, all their angles made known. Have you received thoughts and wondered why they've not occurred to you before? They could be his. That's a poem that goes through the process and that ends with just that feeling that people's thoughts remain and circulate in life and in the world.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that the process was difficult because I mean Mike wasn't strong. He couldn't hold a pen. He couldn't sign his name. I mean, it was just finally they just took the scroll. I held a pen in his hand. There were all of those things, and I mean, the fact that somehow that the physician's blue metallic glasses were this this detail, that that you know you hold on to images that don't even seem meaningful at the time, and they're yelling. I mean, because my husband hardly could hear, the doctor had hearing challenges, the screaming out of medical assistants in dying as all of this is going on. And I mean, in some ways it was sort of funny even at the time, and also just so human, and it was really kind of like we traveled a lot because of both of our jobs, and we often sat in airports with our suitcases waiting. And he kept saying, well, what time is it? When are they coming? And that's in 15 minutes in the poem. And I sat there and I had packed a rollerboard suitcase with his things in it. And it was just as if we were waiting for an airplane.
Mm.
And that was sort of bizarre, but wonderful too. It was like, because that was so much a part of our lives.
It's that line in particular actually really, like, it really affects me, the suitcase waiting, because I mean, obviously it's also the journey that he takes alone
Absolutely.
without you as a
Mhm.
couple. I just find it really, like, really moving.
Um, I mean, I wrote the poem, I edited the poem, I read the poem, but that image of the suitcase, it gets me too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You talk about in that poem, like, I've done this for cats. And I'm not trying to diminish pet loss, because it's like it's no good when your cat dies either. But it this comes up again and again in these book clubs where we have people that are like loved ones who are so committed to their partner's bodily autonomy. They want to make sure that they are doing right by their partner, but there's still just so many complex and conflicting emotions. Our The last book club we did with Sarah Levitt, I think, who you know, like she talks about that too, wanting to help Donamo, but also feels so conflicted about it. And I guess I wanted to ask both of you about that conflict and dealing. I think Oceanna, you mentioned it before, dealing with that conflict. Am I a good enough caregiver? Did someone feel like they're a burden? How does that play out or work?
I mean, I think for me, I'm always sad when the loved one, the family, cares for the person, because when you are being the caregiver, the everyday caregiver, it also takes away a bit of the intimacy because you get focused on the task.
Mm.
And at the end of life, we have to take the human care of the body, but that intimacy and knowing that that intimacy will be lost when the body is no more. I find that there's often people will talk afterwards, after the death, that they feel like they missed out on some of the conversations because they were so bodily tired of caring for the person, and they felt torn, like they wanted to make sure that they physically cared, because that's how one of the ways we show love is caring. But also there was a missing of the sitting and holding the hand and just maybe not even saying something, or having those conversations that even though you've been married 50 years, there are some things that maybe you never talked about. And this is the last moment. So I think finding that balance, or one of the greatest gifts we can give as friends or as family that maybe is a little removed, is to make sure that maybe we pick up some of those human tasks of care, so that the people closest to the person that is going to have the procedure, they have that space and that time and even that silence to be able to share an intimacy that they will never have again with that individual, right? Once their body is gone from their environment. So yeah, I don't know, Molly, how do you feel about that?
When in the hospital, in the hall one time, I bumped into one of Mike's doctors who just looked at me and said, um, "Don't be a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
be a wife."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just, I thought that was so simple. I thought, yes. And I'm a crummy nurse. I really, I never, and when I went to high school, there were only two boxes that girls could check. Okay, you could be a nurse or you could be a teacher. I always checked teacher. I didn't want to be a nurse. Um, and 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 I was angry at having to be a nurse. And
Yeah.
I spent, I mean, I was furious a lot in maybe the last 5 or 6 years. And I am so grateful for my own therapist. I knew I had to have help because I could not unleash that anger on him. What, that I couldn't do that. But I had to have some place for it to go. And some of these, it surfaces in some of these poems in
Mm-hmm.
my book. People, I think, can have a lot of guilt about their anger.
Yes.
Mm.
And one of the things that people have said to me that they've appreciated so much, and that's that's part of the 152 colors of emotions, is that it's that I said I was furious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that's another, I don't know, it's terrible to have responsibility without control. I mean, if you have responsibility and you can actually affect things, that's a kind of power. But to have that responsibility and not be able to affect things it's very, very depleting. I do feel, and I feel very strongly about this, though, that because when the person chooses MAiD, they've made that choice, and you can follow it up, do what you have to do to make that possible. And if you can step up to the plate in that way, a lot of the things that you blamed yourself for can start to evaporate. You don't have to keep hauling them around, uh, because because life isn't just sort of happening anymore. Life is being determined, and an end is being determined. And that is a little bit like making art. I mean, because you do you decide on an end.
Done.
When you're writing something, you say, okay, this is finished now. And there is, to have a shape, to understand the shape of your life is a deeply satisfying and moving thing.
Mm.
And when you're with someone who makes that decision, they're saying, it's now. Here's the end. Here's the shape. And understanding that allows a lot of, you can just do a lot of forgiving of yourself and the other person, whatever the inadequacies were, uh, the feeling I should have done this, I should have done that. Uh, it doesn't all get resolved in a shape, but it becomes part of it. And you're not there, but busy blaming yourself for something. Every it's an imperfect situation. Of course, you're gonna be, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. We have this idea that what's a perfect death? Oh, for a caregiver behaving perfectly. Well, that's not gonna happen. It's just plain not gonna happen. I don't know whether
And
that was
yet,
helpful or not, but
yeah, and yet, I love one of my favorite poems, which I'd love to read if you let me.
Oh, yeah. Can you read? Yes,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. Deciding to end your life, you thank me. I just adore this poem. When you looked up and said, thank you, I saw your gratitude rise over us like rain. It seemed external to us both, an awe of what we were about to do, a sane alternative to modern agony. And the dryness between us had been like climate, like desiccation, like chapped lips, only chapped everything. You'd stopped being a mate, stopped thinking. I'd begun drying up, rough as a towel in the wind. So your thank you was rain. It swept through like a front. One thanks enough to drench everything. It was pouring, plain moisture plumping cells from without and within. And I stood getting soaked to a rapid bloom, knowing you knew the wasteland we'd been in. And from this, we'd make your desert garden. I just love it. Love that poem.
that's a wonderful reading. I've never actually heard it before in somebody else's voice. I really appreciated it.
Oh,
Thank
it's so
you.
beautiful. Yeah.
It is so beautiful. Actually, the way you wrote it was gorgeous. Thank you. Um, I do notice that we have one question. I want to make sure that we get to that question from the audience. I feel like we could go on for another like 5 hours, but uh, my last question for both of you is, first of all, Oceanna, where can we find you? And Molly, where can we get your book?
So I work in Victoria, BC, or outside Victoria for Island Health Authority. So you can find me in my hospital doing my thing. So for Island Health, and my hospital is Saanich Peninsula Hospital. It's a little community hospital that I absolutely love working.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. You better watch out now. People are going to come.
They're gonna go.
The Widow's Crayon Box is available all over Canada in your at your local material bricks and mortar bookstore, also online through all of the online sources. It is published by W. Norton and distributed in Canada by Penguin Random House Canada, and so it's very available, and and you can find me just by Googling Molly Peacock. My website should come up right away, and if you write a poem, I hope you'll send it to me.
Oh, that's so nice. Oh no, now you're gonna get so many poems.
Oh dear, well, I didn't say I was going to respond the same day, but I will really respond.
Okay, so I have a question here, and it's also a little bit of lovely feedback. Just excuse me while I read it out. I love the way that you talked about the gradual encompassing of the water in Touched. It's very real and accurate. Both my mother and stepmother chose MAiD, knowing that there was a specific day forced our family to have some of those important conversations and goodbyes. When my wife died, we didn't have the same conversations and intentional goodbyes because she always wished for another day. She wanted to use MAiD, but slipped into a coma before she was able to do so. I think that not having that time and opportunity created a different kind of a more complicated grief for me. Do you think that knowing the end date is one of the, and this person had air quotes, the benefits of MAiD?
Well, I mean, I certainly do. I certainly do. Um, I'm just going to use the example of a sonnet. When you write a sonnet, it's 14 lines, and you know it's 14 lines when you start off, but you kind of forget. You get around the eighth line, the ninth line, you're going along, then you go, OMG, 14 is coming up. It's coming up. I have to say it. I have to do it. What do I really want to say? And then you've just got to do it. And there is something about knowing that. And all those people out there who are thinking about that they are deadline driven, yes, you can be deadline driven in work, but also there is something about a literal deadline that that makes you say, okay, now only the necessary, only what's important. No more fooling around here. Um, what's really important, that's got to be said. That's got to be felt. And I think it's one of the marvels of this of the ability to choose MAiD in an atmosphere of 21st century medicine. We must have a 21st century choice.
And I also, I guess as someone that has participated in many and supported families in many provisions now, I also want to just briefly say how important MAiDHouse is. MAiDHouse has given us here in Victoria an option for people to come to this beautiful space where it is so calm and so non-medical. It's like coming to your living room and you can invite whoever you want to be there. And it doesn't cost the person, it doesn't cost the family anything because we're a nonprofit. And it's the most beautiful offering that I can give to people, or our providers can give, is to let people know that say, oh, I don't want to go to the hospital, or, oh, I don't want to do it in the bed that my wife or husband has to sleep in after. So now, because of the generosity of MAiDHouse Toronto, which supported us to get started, we here in Victoria have this beautiful space where people can come. I'm doing another one there just this next Thursday in a couple of days. It's just, I love to be able to share that with families when they're very concerned about where can they do it, and they want privacy, and they can't do it at home. And now I can say, well, let me tell you, we have this beautiful space. It's called MAiDHouse Victoria. If you're interested, talk to your provider about it. And I love being able to say that now. So I have
Thank
great
you.
love for it.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the work that you do. So thank you. I honestly, I feel like I had so many questions and we got to like maybe 3 of them because the discussion was so good. Thank you so much, both of you. Molly, thank you for your beautiful work. We're going to keep a copy of this book both at the Toronto location and also at the Victoria House location. It's just when people come through, sometimes they need something to do and look at something, and it's just a really important work. I also wanted to give like a really deep bow of gratitude to your husband and for you for sharing the stories about him, and like getting to know him through this poetry is really, really nice experience. So thank you for that. Thank you so much, Oceanna, for all your wisdom and the very, very brave work that you do. And hearing your insights today was really, really, like I scribbled down some notes that I need to take for myself. So thank you for that. I want to thank Tekla, who's on this call under the MAiDHouse. She's our fearless executive director, and Nikki, who is a communication specialist at MAiDHouse. Thank you to our donors again for making these sessions possible, and for everybody who is listening tonight, joining in the conversation. As you close out of this session, you'll notice that there is a survey that pops up. I'd be most appreciative if you could fill it out. It just helps us plan for future events to talk about the importance of creativity and death work. So I'm wishing all of you a really good night and take very good care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceanna. Thank you so much, Stan, for your calmness, your good humor, and all your questions.
Thank you. Thank you.